Watch today's video until the end, because there is information at the end that not everyone knows. And subscribe to the channel now to get such videos regularly. Over 6 decades of enthralling audiences and establishing a lasting legacy on stage and. On September 26, 2024, Kristoffer Kristofferson passed away. He was an icon whose impact spanned generations, a voice for soulful songs, an actor who brought characters to life with honesty and grit, and a true friend with a big heart. Kris shared many personal and heartbreaking details about his life before his passing. To fully understand his final confessions, let's rewind the clock and explore his incredible life. Journey. Kristofferson wasn't your typical Texas kid growing up. Born in Brownsville on June 22, 1936, he was the oldest of 3 in a strict military family, which meant moving around a lot. Eventually, though, his family settled down in San Mateo, California just in time for his junior high years. By the time high school graduation rolled around in 1954, Kris had already started showing signs of the creative genius that would define his career. He attended Pomona College in Southern California, where he developed a love for writing, especially the works of poet William Blake. Kris didn't just dabble, he excelled. He snagged several awards for his writing, including a top prize in a short story contest from the Atlantic Monthly. But he wasn't just a bookworm, he was a star on the football field and even gave Golden Gloves boxing a shot, proving he was just as tough as he was talented. After graduating with honors in 1958, Kris landed a Rhodes Scholarship to study literature at Oxford. So off he went to England, where he took up songwriting alongside his studies, performing under the name Kristofferson in local clubs. He recorded a few tracks for a small label, but nothing took off. After finishing his degree, he headed back to the States, unsure of what was next. Faced with a big decision, Kris made a sharp turn. Instead of pursuing an academic career, he followed the family tradition and joined the U.S. Army. He trained as a ranger and helicopter pilot, eventually getting stationed in West Germany. But no matter how far he was from home, music stayed close. He even started a band with fellow soldiers, performing at various events and keeping his creative spirit alive while serving his country. By 1965, Kristofferson, a captain, was offered a teaching position at West Point. However, a summer trip to Nashville changed his mind. The city's musical energy captivated him, and he decided to turn down the job. Kris struggled to make a name for himself in the music industry while juggling odd jobs and mounting medical bills due to his son's esophagus defect. The strain was so intense that he didn't speak to his mother for over 20 years. During his divorce in 1968, Kris worked sweeping floors at Columbia recording studios in Nashville. Despite the mundane job, Kris met June Carter, who passed a tape of his music to Johnny Cash, who famously threw it onto a pile of other tapes. International in South Louisiana for 3 years, he bounced between sitting on oil platforms, flying helicopters, and heading back to Nashville to pitch his songs. Despite the grind, this period proved creatively fruitful. Some of his biggest hits, including Help Me Make It Through the Night and Me and Bobby McGee, were written during those long quiet hours on the oil rigs. However, at this point, Kris was getting desperate, trying everything to break into the music industry, and you know what they say. Desperate times call for desperate measures. Weeks after giving June Carter his tapes, he decided to take matters into his own hands, literally in a wild move that's now part of music legend. Kris flew a helicopter and landed it right in Johnny Cash's front yard. That definitely got Cash's attention. After listening to Sunday Morning Coming Down, Cash knew he had something special and decided to record it. The song was a hit, and in 1970, Kristofferson won Song of the Year at the Country Music Association Awards for it. This was the big break he needed. Even before that, his songs were slowly starting to gain traction. After releasing Vietnam Blues in 1966, Dave Dudley gained recognition in the late 1960s, with country singers performing his work. In 1971, Janis Joplin's rendition of Me and Bobby McGee, released posthumously, catapulted Kristoffer to the next level as a songwriter with a raw sense of storytelling. The song topped the charts for weeks, and everyone wanted a piece of Kristoffer's music. Joe Simon and even country great Kenny Rogers. It seemed like overnight Kris had gone from an oil rig pilot with a dream to one of the most sought-after songwriters in the business, and this was only the beginning. By the early 70s, Kristofferson was riding a wave of success, but like any good story, there were a few bumps along the way. His second album, The Silver-Tongued Devil and I, in 1971, took off, cementing his reputation not just as a songwriter but as a full-fledged recording artist. Songs like Ling Her Was Easier captured listeners with their raw emotion, and it wasn't long before Hollywood came calling. Kris made his acting debut in the last movie directed by none other than Dennis Hopper, and he even performed at the Isle of Wight Festival, rubbing shoulders with the biggest names in rock at the time. His career was expanding beyond the boundaries of country music. By the end of 1971, Kristofferson had gone from a relatively unknown songwriter to a big name in country music. His songs were everywhere, with 3 of them competing in multiple categories at the Grammy Awards. It was clear that Kris had arrived. In fact, at the March 1972 awards, he took home the Grammy for Best Country Song for Help Me Make It Through the Night, and his rise to stardom was officially sealed soon after. Kris released Jesus' A Capricorn in 1972, which became a huge success thanks to his first #1 country single, Why Me. The album sold 500,000 copies and hit the top spot on the country charts by November 1973, showing that Kris wasn't just passing through, he was here to stay. During this exciting time in his career, Kris's personal life was also taking a turn. After his divorce from his first wife, he found love again with fellow singer Rita Coolidge. The two not only shared a romance but also a musical partnership that fans loved. Their first duet, the duo's album Full Moon, topped country charts in 1973 and earned 2 Grammy Awards for songs like From the Bottle to the Bottom and Lover Please. They were known as the country music dream team, both on and off the stage. Kris's solo albums, Spooky Ladies, were also released during this time. Sideshow, Who's to Bless and Who's to Blame, and Surreal Thing did okay, but they didn't compare to the massive success of the AAR Is Born soundtrack, which he worked on with Barbra Strand. That soundtrack topped the Billboard 200 and went platinum by 1977, selling over 4 million copies. It wasn't just a country hit, it was a mainstream smash, further boosting Kris's fame. As the 70s wrapped up, Kris released a few more albums like Easter Island and Shake Hands with the Devil, along with his final duet album with Coolidge, Natural Act, before the two split up. Even though his marriage to Rita ended, Kris's music kept resonating with fans. Fellow country legends like Willie Nelson continued covering his songs, and they even teamed up for collaborations. The 1980s and 1990s were a roller coaster for Kris Kristofferson, filled with both triumphs and setbacks, while he continued releasing solo albums like To the Bone in 1981, Third World Warrior in 1990, and A Moment of Forever in 1995. It was his collaborations and soundtrack contributions that really shined during this time. One of his standout projects was The Winning Hand in 1983, where Kris teamed up with legends like Willie Nelson, Dolly Parton, and Brenda Lee. The album hit #4 on Billboard's Top Country Albums chart, reminding everyone that Kris still had that star power. In 1984, Kris ventured into movies once again, starring in songwriter and contributing to its soundtrack, which earned him an Academy Award nomination for Best Music. This was a huge nod to his musical talents beyond Only Nation. 1985 was a significant year for Kris. He was honored into the Songwriters Hall of Fame and joined the country supergroup The Highwaymen, featuring Willie Nelson, Johnny Cash, and Willie Jennings, had a #1 country album and produced memorable songs, including the Grammy-nominated title track. They followed up with Highwaymen 2 in 1990, which also earned a Grammy nomination. Their final album, Road Goes On Forever, failed to capture their success. In his subsequent appearances, he collaborated with notable actors, such Gene Hackman in Cisco Pike portrayed Billy the Kid, Pat Garrett, and Billy the Kid opposite Ellen Burstyn. Martin Scorsese's Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore, not bad for a guy who was just starting out on the big screen, but it was A Star Is Born that really put Kristofferson on Hollywood's map. Playing an aging rocker opposite Barbra Strand, Kristofferson brought a raw energy to the role. Even though critics weren't exactly singing its praises despite the reviews, audiences loved it, and the movie turned into a box office hit. The soundtrack, featuring both Kristofferson and Strand, became a massive success too, and while Kristofferson was already a star in the music world, this film earned him a Golden Globe for Best Actor and made him a household name in Hollywood. After that high, though, things slowed down a bit throughout the 80s and early 90s. Kristofferson found himself in a bunch of forgettable TV movies, and even his big screen projects like Heaven's Gate and No Place to Hide didn't make much of an impact. He did, however, take on a politically charged role in the limited series America, which Imagined a dystopian future where the Soviet Union had taken over America just when it seemed like his acting career might be fading. Kristofferson came roaring back in Lonar, playing the complex role of Sheriff Charlie Wade in this critically acclaimed film. He reminded everyone that he still had serious acting chops. From there he snagged roles in the Blade Vampire trilogy, the heartwarming A Soldier's Daughter Never Cries, and action flicks like Payback with Mel Gibson and Tim Burton's Planet of the Apes. Even later in his career he stayed active, appearing in smaller films like The Motel Life and the Western Traded, whether it was through music or movies. Kristofferson always found a way to stay in the spotlight, proving that talent and grit go a long way. However, like many other stars, he struggled with an addiction that almost cost him his life. Kristofferson's struggles with alcohol were significant and nearly derailed his life and career. In the 1960s and 1970s he was a self-described functioning alcoholic, leaning heavily on Jack Daniel's tequila and anything else within reach. For Kristofferson, alcohol wasn't just a part of the lifestyle. It was a crutch. His drinking habits were so extreme that he couldn't even picture himself performing without a drink in hand. It became part of his routine, part of his identity during those years. In an interview with People, Kristofferson revealed that he didn't expect to make it past 30. He drank so much that his liver swelled to the size of a football, a clear warning sign that his body was suffering the consequence of his addiction, although he managed to quit drinking cold turkey at one point. The battle wasn't over. Later in life he fell back into old habits, admitting that he always kept a half-gallon of Jose Cuervo in his trailer, ensuring it was never empty. Despite the success he enjoyed as both a songwriter and actor, alcohol nearly cost him everything. Like many others who found themselves in the public eye, he faced the very real challenge of addiction. However, alcohol was not the only battle the singer-songwriter battled throughout his life. Kristofferson often spoke about his feelings of being an imposter. Despite all his success in music and acting, he frequently mentioned how he felt like he didn't belong in the entertainment world even as he gained. He experienced imposter syndrome due to his unique path to fame, having been a Rhodes Scholar and Army helicopter pilot before pursuing music. Kristofferson felt marginalized in interviews. Kristofferson struggled with self-doubt and doubted his talent, even after writing iconic country songs and receiving accolades. His openness and humility insecurities earned him fans, but life is fleeting. Kristofferson, 88, died peacefully at his Maui home on September 28, 2024. His family did not disclose the cause of death. In the years preceding up to his death, Kristofferson openly discussed his health issues, including memory loss, initially labeled as Alzheimer's or dementia but eventually identified as Lyme disease. Kristofferson stayed close to his family and a beloved character in music and film industry. His wife survives him. His 8 kids and Lisa Myers Tracy, Kris, Casey, Jesse, Jody, John Kelly, and Blake, together with 7 grandchildren, express thanks for his time with them and the love from fans throughout the years.